Elizabeth, can you hear us okay? Okay, great. We can't hear you, but you're muted, but that's okay. Just unmute whenever you want to join on it.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, we are live.
Great. We will begin the City of Rollingwood Utility Commission meeting for Thursday, November 7th of 2024. We will start with roll call, starting to my left.
Chris Kirk, Clark Wilson.
Jonathan Miller.
Christopher Meekin.
Elizabeth Bright.
Wonderful. Moving on to public comments. I would be shocked if there were any. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Discussion and possible action on the minutes from the September 3rd, 2024 Utility Commission meeting. You want to make
You got all in favor?
we don't have to make a motion to.
Oh, motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
So we have a motion to accept, seconded, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
That doesn't leave anyone for opposing or abstaining, so the ayes have it. Regular agenda, discussion and possible action regarding a policy for grinder pump maintenance and replacement. Ashley,
Yes.
what do we got?
Hello. All right. So this is an item that has come down from the City Council. This year in the budget process, staff had brought just kind of to the attention of council that we have these expenses for grinder pumps. I don't know if anyone in here is at a property that has a grinder pump, but you are okay. So about 120 of our homes have grinder pumps. They're often in places where the topography is needed to get the sewage and everything lifted up to the street and to connect into our system. And it has been something that the city has always historically just paid for. So they're on private property, they're at people's homes. However, the city, whenever I guess the sewer system was installed back whenever that was, I don't say whatever it was, but whenever each individual grinder pump or home came online, the city paid for the installation and has been paying for maintenance ever since. At this point, I think a lot of the grinder pumps are getting a little older. A lot of them are malfunctioning a lot more than they maybe had in the past, and so we are seeing our expenses in that category go up considerably. And the City Council, during their budget process, they didn't make any decisions on what that would look like, but they did put in a line item in the budget for some type of fee for grinder pump maintenance, or they didn't really specify what it was going to look like. They just kind of put in a placeholder that says we would like to look into this. And so what you'll see in your packet, we have provided some information on how much we've paid for monthly for the grinder pumps since August of 2021. You can see it varies. Some months we have absolutely nothing. Some months we have very high expenses. And kind of the way the maintenance on those works is when one is malfunctioning, we have two backups that HydroSource is actually the company that does this for us. And so they'll just come in, and if there's one that's malfunctioning and we aren't able to fix it by resetting it or something, if like it's just a power issue, they'll take out the old pump, drop in a new pump, so that way it can continue to work, and they'll take that old one back and work on it and try to see if they can get it in working order. And usually they can, but often they do have to, or sometimes they have to replace it and buy a new one, and they're fairly expensive. I don't have a quote on that, but I'll get that before our next discussion, just so we can keep talking about it. But so the City Council gave us kind of a list of questions. We talked through this with them last month, and our question is, if we're going to do something like that, how do we want to approach it? Different cities do it different ways. Some places the resident just pays for the maintenance, so the resident is on the hook for all of the maintenance calls. Other places, residents actually are in charge of getting their own plumber to do the maintenance. I think part of the reasoning why that's not as common is you want to make sure it's a licensed plumber who's working on your system, because though it is on a private property, it is going to go into your city's system, and you do want to make sure that someone who knows how to work on a grinder pump, which I think from what I understand, it's a little more specialty than just maybe some regular plumbers. It might not be as common. So that is what some cities do. Other cities just have a monthly fee where they just say, hey, if you have a grinder pump, you pay X amount per month, and that goes into a bucket that we then use to pay for grinder pump maintenance. And then some have like cost sharing where the resident will pay for half of that. I believe that's actually what Westlake Hills had been doing. It was kind of a 50-50, and then the city would pick up the rest of it. I guess something that kind of pops up as a concern with those is you then do have to go collect from the resident, and you do have to have some kind of agreement where they sign that yes, I will pay for this amount. Also concerns come up, well, if I have to pay for it, why can't I get my own plumber to do it? Why do we have to go through the city's plumber? So there's just different things to consider in the different ways that we would consider doing some kind of fee for that. Some of the questions that council asked were about what types of calls they are. We're still trying to get more information on this, but they have told us that the most common calls are just failed pumps or electrical failure. We're trying to find out a little bit too if there's more, if there's any calls related to misuse as opposed to just natural wear and tear. So, if you pop it open and there's candy wrappers in there, that it's being, the incorrect items are being flushed, or the flushable wipes that are not really flushable, those do a lot of damage. And so, trying to kind of understand more information about that. There were questions about how many calls a month, if maybe we might look at possibly doing a per call fee as opposed to per month fee. So just all sorts of things they wanted to consider, but all of that's here in the packet. I won't go through any more of the questions, but we just kind of wanted to start the conversation here. We realize we don't have everything lined up and ready yet, so we have all the information, but just wanted to get y'all's general thoughts. I will say from a staff perspective, probably the preferred from our end would just be a monthly user fee. That would be the cleanest, the easiest to collect. Obviously, if we're having maybe a part reimbursement from a resident, it could be a really large bill at one point. Like they could get a $3,000 bill and have to pay half of it all at once. So I think the way we see it, spreading it out over multiple months makes a little bit more sense. It might be easier to collect. From an administrative standpoint, that's kind of our reasoning, but definitely open to other discussions and how we want to handle it. So just starting the discussion. We don't expect to have a policy today ready, but if y'all want to give us your thoughts and talk about it and maybe give us anything to consider, we'll take it back and work on some draft language.
So how many grinder pumps are on the commercial lines?
I don't know the answers for how many is residential and how many are commercial.
Top of my head,
Two.
yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was mostly residential, but I think we do have a couple commercial.
And there are additional pumps in the that are part of our system that are separate from these. That
Right, like
are
our lift stations.
lift stations and so
Mhm.
forth. And so one of our previous utility supervisors said, don't throw eggshells down your garbage disposal because they cut up the impellers, which I guess are rubber.
Ah.
And is that also an issue with these grinder pumps? Are the impellers made of rubber, or do they?
That's a question I can find out. I don't know the answer to that. They didn't offer up that it appeared to be misuse and things like that. So I don't know if,
Yeah.
I think they would have said something if like, hey, we're having a problem with these, the rubber impellers constantly being torn up or something. We
Yeah.
haven't heard that, but I'll double check that.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Actually, the data said there was 110 grinder pumps,
About 120,
and there's 540
560.
homes, so we're sharing these pumps?
Right now, currently everyone is paying. They're on only homes that require them, but
Because I thought the data point of one, mine is probably only me.
right, and that's how they are. They only serve one home each
Okay,
grinder
so
pump.
it's not like Phil and I are sharing.
Right. Well, not that I'm aware of. I mean, we can look. Who
Yeah,
knows? There might be a
there's
couple.
sometimes where the sewer-
couple crazy ones, yeah,
couple,
but-
there's no easement either.
Right. Right.
So the reason I need a grinder pump is because my sewer goes into my backyard, which is below, and then it has to pump it over
yeah. Mm-hmm.
to the sewer.
Right.
You can't use gravity, so it's my problem, not
Mm-hmm.
the city's problem.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So those were all part of the original LCRA design, I assume.
Yes, I believe so. And I'm
the
sure.
The policy also was probably put in there by the LCRA, I guess.
Right, and we don't have a lot of documentation from that time. We had even I had heard people say, oh, well, here's what happened. The city put them in and said the first grinder pump replacement's on us, and after that, it's on you, resident. But we've found no
Yeah.
you know, formal documents that state that. We don't have records of how many times any have been replaced or things like that. Obviously, other than when they're newer, we might have record of purchasing them. So, it just was never apparently formalized.
So regarding the question of misuse or abuse of pumps, if you have a record of which pumps have been
Been
done,
replaced.
that would be useful, I think, to judge whether we have a problem
An issue.
person or.
Yeah, if there's a repeat
Right.
offender.
I would think so too. I guess the other thing that could be is age, though. If they have one of the older ones that
Right.
happens to be going out,
course.
so I think usually it's somewhat clear if there's abuse happening. I think you can see when we get stuck in there that aren't supposed to, and I haven't heard of it very frequently. Maybe once since I've been here that we talked to Public Works and they said, oh yeah, there were candy wrappers and all sorts of stuff. So I think that's something we'd want to take into consideration for this. Like maybe they pay their monthly fee, but if it's misuse, I think that we could write something into a policy that says if it's clearly, you know, done by something that is not supposed to be going down the drain, then that we could recoup all of those fees or something. So
Yeah, I think an understanding of the dollar amounts we're actually talking about here would help provide some guidance as to what is the city been paying for on an annual basis. What's the actual, you know, it'd be one thing to say, look, if we replaced all 120, we know they'd be good for the next 50 years, but I don't think it works that way with these, right?
right, definitely.
Do we know what the useful life of a pump or normal life is?
I don't know, but that's another question we'll go back and find out. We, and you're right, we don't have the cost of the actual individual ones, but we do have kind of the monthly spend. And if we look at it roughly from the last, 38 months, which would go back to August 2021, which was just what we had, you know, detail for, it's approximately $20 a month that the city has spent, per grinder pump per month. So that we kind of were looking
so we're
at that
saying
as
if you ended up,
Mhm.
as of today, not adjusting for future costs, if we said you now have a $20 fee associated with your grinder pump, that would roughly net us to zero.
Right, roughly, we do, I mean, I'm assuming that the expenses will get higher in the future as they get older, if it's not something where they're, you know, replaced. I think Westlake Hills went with $30 a month for theirs, but they obviously have a different number of them and different infrastructure, so it's not quite the same, but I think as of right now, looking back, if we were looking at the last 38 months, then $20 a month would have covered it, but it's just it's hard to tell. You know, if one has to be replaced, that's kind of
Yep.
blows your budget there. So, and you know, again, it's all being currently funded out of the wastewater fund, and so it's being covered by rates at this point. It's not like the city is like, we don't have the money to pay for this. Like it's being covered, and so it is currently being paid that way. But I think it's just a matter of, do we want it being spread over all of the utility customers, just those that work on the grinder pumps, or that have a grinder pump? I think that's just kind of the question that we were unsure of.
That's where I was gonna go. Data point of one, I've had one for 20 years and it went out once and they replaced it. So if that's helpful.
Have you had any alarms where they've had to come out? Have you had to call for any of that stuff?
It has a little light and the light starts blinking, and so you know to go. It's basically a 55-gallon drum with something that churns inside of it, and so they pull the top off and they replace the top part, and it's garbage disposal pretty much.
Right.
It's a giant disposal.
And I think the philosophical question is, because the way my house is set up, I need one, and the way John's house is set up, he doesn't, and so should John have to pay for mine? I guess that's the question.
Well, I mean, I guess and I get why they're asking, right? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
at some point they're like, hey, it adds up, obviously, when you look at the amounts. I'm also curious, you know, one month it's $500 and another month it's $12,000. Is that the cost of replacing a pump versus a service call to go out and check a light and the light bulb was out and they replaced the light bulb and it works now and it's $500?
That's a
Like,
good
what's
question.
I mean, that's a huge variation.
And
in
that could have
cost.
been 4 separate grinder pumps that went out that month. I mean, it's all very, you know, very different. Sometimes if it's gone on for a certain amount of time, a truck has to come out and pump out the grinder pump. So there's all sorts of things that could add to it. But I can definitely look into some of those really higher months and see, like, what leads us to pay $12,000 in 1 month for a grinder pump.
So, I mean, I think the easy one is if people throw stuff down the wastewater system and they chew up their pump, they need to pay for it. That's easy.
Right.
So then the other part is, what do we do with this? Is it, do we get a fixed fee from the company, like, and so it's like basically insurance, or do we pay per pump? Is that kind of where y'all?
I
Because
think
one of the questions I saw they asked, they were like, well, what would it cost if we just paid y'all for a maintenance contract?
Who paid for the maintenance? Like if the
Like the company that comes and replaces it, our wastewater company.
Gotcha. I mean, I don't know that. I mean, I think the way we're paying for it is just pretty. It's just based on charges. It's based on exactly what they have to do. I'm sure there's maybe a small amount of markup or overhead and all of that, but I think it's more about if or how we would like to recover any of those costs, basically, and how they want to be distributed. I think that they had approached us about this a while back, and they had brought, here's what we do in some other cities. Here's these agreements that you have your customers sign that say, I agree to pay, 50% of this if something happens. And it's just, those can get very expensive for certain people, but then you're like, well, if you're misusing the, the pump, then you should maybe pay more. So I think it's just kind of a philosophical, how do you want to, balance it all?
So up to now, we've been paying it out of the wastewater charge and just paying per broken pump.
Basically, yeah, or any service calls.
So sleeping dogs lie.
That's an option too. I mean, like I said, if you look at it, granted, is $30,000 a year a lot? Yes, but compared to our total fund,
Right.
it's
Total
really
wastewater
not a
fund,
huge, not a huge expense. I think obviously at some point more of them are going to come to the point where they need to be
Oh,
replaced,
absolutely,
and
'cause
so
it was done in 2004.
right. And so the question is going to be then, do we want to put something in place now where we're starting to either build up, maybe some reserves for that, or, or how do we want to handle that, or wait till it happens and then maybe
So
have
is,
a big.
is council asking utility commission to come up with an idea for how to address it? Because ultimately, whatever we decide, it doesn't really matter in the sense of it goes to council. Council can either say, we don't like it, or council can vote, we don't even want to do this. In which case, what we came up with was more of an academic pursuit, but whatever.
Right.
So I guess as opposed to us going back and saying, we didn't want to do anything. Are they asking us come up with a policy and we can decide whether or not we want to move forward with it? I just want to
Phil,
get some
what do you
guidance.
think?
Yeah, I think it's policy guidance that could be either one. It could be, we don't want to, or it could be, here's how we see it, happening.
I think we're looking for guidance, and among the things is, as I'm sitting here, do we need to contact everybody that's got a grinder pump and get input, or the other, the community as a whole, and get input of how, as a community, do we want to address this, because I can just imagine everybody that's got a grinder pump suddenly gets a new charge on their bill, and we're going to have to deal with that, among other things, if we instituted it on the people that just had grinder pumps. We have no idea. This hit us out of the blue, same as it's hitting you out of the blue. We're not deciding anything today, nor will council, but we're just kind of looking for more brains working the problem,
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I have a question. Are there not also residents that have grinder pumps that the city did not pay to install, that they put in themselves?
I believe so.
That would be from new construction.
Right. That actually could have happened. Our code does not allow that. Our code says basically you're going to put in the type of pump that we approve. And so I have heard from other people that, we didn't know that. We just put one in. We have our own and we maintenance it. And so there are some, I'm sure that is the case, but I don't think that was ever the intention. But sometimes things happen without, permitting or something like that.
Right,
So we
yeah.
wouldn't know,
because
but ultimately, unless they called to say, hey, my grinder pump's out, you need to fix it, you'd be like, we don't have you on the record of having one.
Right.
So chances are they're just maintaining it themselves.
So we're talking about the LCRA buyover pumps, and that's it.
Right, yeah, and any since then, I mean, others
any
that
since
come on,
then,
yeah,
yeah.
I think what our code says about it is, if a grinder pump is necessary as determined by the Director of Public Works or other designated agent of the city as determined by, the property owner shall install a grinder pump approved by the Director of Public Works or other designated agent of the city. Thereafter, the city may repair and replace subsequent grinder pumps to serve the property in accordance with policies or budgets adopted from time to time by city council. So it sounds like maybe the first round, maybe the city bought at some point, or maybe the resident bought it back in '04. I don't know if anyone
I didn't pay for it.
yeah, had to pay for one, but it looks like now the point is that we tell them what kind of grinder pumps it needs to be, the specs, and then we maintain and replace it per our city's code.
We still
So-
maintain, they might install the initial, but we would fix, which is what they're saying was happened maybe the first time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But so the 120 homes though number should capture all, I say call all known, but all the grinder pumps unless
City approved.
That we maintenance, right?
City
City
approved.
City
known and approved, right?
Right.
Which we should note from the building process that if one was had to be put in through like the engineering when it was built, but again, we don't always have like perfect records from the past.
In any case, we're not necessarily maintaining those, so there's no expense related to them.
Sure,
Either.
yeah. Yeah, likely they're newer if that's the case, and they maybe haven't had any issues. So
Yeah, I think with something like this, even though it won't necessarily impact me, I think it's helpful to understand what the cost of the, so when you're trying to balance, well, what's my monthly fee over the chance of it breaking over 5 years versus do I just say, hey, I'll replace it when it breaks, I mean, because I may never have to need it, and I live here for 20 years, and
Yeah.
I paid $20 a month for 20 years, and I've never seen the benefit,
Exactly.
which is the insurance policy, kind of comparison.
right.
Versus just saying, yeah, I understand I cover it's mine, right?
Mhm.
It's my air conditioner, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for us to maybe, I think it'd be helpful to have the number to kind of do a little math and say,
Sure.
most people would say they'd be happy to just cover the cost when it happens, although we might want to build something in there that again, the city finance, I mean, not everyone, if it's a $5,000 hit, depending on the the resident, that might be difficult in that month to have
Right.
a $5,000 hit. Whereas the $20 a month and it just gets replaced, they don't really think about it, obviously is a different approach, and maybe we give them the option, I don't know.
Yeah.
And your $20 a month was for 120 bills.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Looking
so if
back.
you spread it over all 560, it would come out to be $7 a month
But
or
yeah,
something like that.
definitely lower than that.
And we're already paying about $20 a month on a basic infrastructure fee in our,
On the
Yeah,
wastewater
it's
base
about
rate.
$20.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I can see it being in there,
Mm-hmm.
and I can also see it being, hey man, you needed a pump, it's your deal.
Yeah, I mean, it might just come down to looking at the books, but certainly before we do anything, we ought to have some more information as
Sure.
we discuss, but, looking at the budget of the wastewater system would probably be, all part of this discussion.
Of course.
And I want to make sure I clarify, if we were to add a fee to everyone's bill as an example to cover it, isn't that the same as we're already covering?
I
Right.
think that wouldn't maybe make any difference. Right. Everybody
It's
would still
exactly
be
the same.
paying. They'd all
You
be
just don't
sharing
see
the
it.
cost. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the intent would be to only add the monthly fee to homes that had the grinder pump.
Yeah, okay.
So that when we did that math of however many per month per grinder pump, that was as if it was only put on those that have a grinder pump.
Would we need to put some language in there so that if somebody, their grinder pump fails every other year, and that's a little unusual, how many times did the city pay for it?
Right. I think
Well, I
that
think
you'd want to
that's-
limit that.
I think that would only happen if we see abuse, and usually when they crack it open, they can see.
Right, but
So there'd be
Just-
normal wear and tear as a
yeah, if normal wear and tear, no
example.
big deal,
And
but if there's,
that's determined by the
yeah, if there's
service
something that you
provider
can
kind
see
of-
that
yeah,
says,
that's
okay,
just-
whatever they're doing is causing this thing to fail every
Right.
2 years.
I think that it could be, hey, your $20 a month or whatever dollar amount covers X charges per year or X whatever, and if you exceed that, then obviously something else is going on, and we need to, you would maybe be charged over that. So there's all sorts of options, kind of however you want to do it, but But we've heard a lot of good questions. It sounds like, is anybody opposed to kind of either school of thought where one is just resident pays a portion of the maintenance, maybe it's a percentage, 50%, something like that if they have a large bill like that, or versus the monthly fee, or is there, more of a sentiment to not, just to let this continue to be out of the wastewater budget and leave it that way?
Allow me to abstain. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm dead serious because I'm interested, and I would probably put it on the homeowner, but allow me to abstain because I'm an interested party in this.
So, but I think it would be nice to have a little bit more information before we actually make that
Sure.
call.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
we can definitely bring back more.
All right.
so I mean, so the information we talked about was finding out exactly what the repairs were, whether there's abusive users,
How much a new pump would cost.
how much a new pump, and then maybe just a general summary of what the wastewater budget is for the year in terms of what percentage this is and
Sure.
what other kinds of maintenance costs are in the system as
Mhm.
well.
Absolutely. We can do that. We'll bring that back at the next meeting we have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank y'all. Great
Moving-
conversation.
One question just came to mind, that the electricity for these grinder pumps, I'm assuming that's coming off the homeowner's meter?
It is, and usually if there's a electrical problem, we don't pay
Mess
for
with it, yeah.
any of that. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be the homeowner gets an electrician out to work on that.
All right, great. Moving on to the next item, which is discussion of possible action regarding electronic meters and related policies.
Hello again. Okay, so we obviously now have our meter project completed. Now every single home in the city and all the commercial projects or properties have a meter. We had a previous policy on the books that actually went through the utility commission probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was in 2021, and this was before I think we knew we were going to do a full rollout the way we did. I think we had envisioned at the time that we could do meters kind of one by one as they needed replacing or as they got upgraded, and that we could maybe move over to that electronic system. That obviously isn't the way it ended up working out. I'm not sure that would have been very efficient or effective from actually getting us all onto electronic meters, and so we did the full project. But it has come up now because these electronic meters are significantly more expensive than the old mechanical meters were. If there's any interest or how we want to go about charging for meter upgrades. We don't see meter replacements or broken meters being an issue anytime soon because they all have a 10-year full
Yeah, I was gonna say
warranty.
10 years, right.
Yeah, 10-year full and another 10 years of prorated. So I think we're good in that way, as if the meter were to just go bad. But the question is for upgrades. We commonly have homes that need a larger, when they're doing a new construction, they have to upgrade their meter. And currently they're paying what has always been in the code for a connection fee for that, but we have not, we don't have anything else in our code that says you pay for the meter, or anything else like that. The cost, the average home size meter is a 3/4 inch meter. And with our electronic meters, that's going to run us about $400 if you count the meter and the endpoint. The endpoint is like the cellular component that makes sure it can grab the data it needs to. So every meter will come with an endpoint. But currently that would cost us about $300 or $400. Our actual cost for that connection fee is $400. So we don't have a lot of people that connect on a new 3/4 inch meter, because that would mean they didn't have a meter before, and nobody's upgrading from below a 3/4 inch. So that's not really a fee that we charge much, but it's more the 1 to 1.5 inch. Those are ones when somebody were to upsize their meter to a 1 inch, they would pay, what we currently have in our code is $550 for that connection fee. We can see from the table that already cost the city $450. That does not include freight, employee hours, anything like that, overhead to get the meter installed. So I guess the question was, well, first off, I think that old policy probably needs to be repealed at this point. It doesn't seem to be, it no longer applies in the situation we're in. And then second, do we want to be looking at any additional policy for, payment for electronic meters? now that they're, you know, significantly more expensive than the other ones, the previous mechanical meters were. In the tables I've highlighted here in the packet, the blue is the most common residential size and the green is the most common commercial size, though we do have some homes that have 1-inch meters for some of those larger homes. And so honestly, looking at it, it's really not that far off. It looks like we are kind of covering our, you know, our costs up to the 1-inch meter. At the 1.5 is kind of where we fall off a little bit, where it costs us more to upsize than we're charging. But that's probably pretty uncommon that we would have any, very frequent upgrades above a 1.5 inch. But we do have some commercial meters that are 2 inches or 3-inch meters. So just kind of, I guess, food for thought. I don't know if what we think about these fees versus how much it actually costs the city, or if there's a movement towards trying to increase those.
So is there an official council action to repeal the previous,
I think we would like that as a recommendation to go ahead and do that, and then maybe we could do that first
Can we
and then
repeal
let
it
them
without
know.
replacing it? Maybe is another.
well,
Yeah, I think so. The old policy wasn't something that was in the code as far as actual fees. I think it was the main point of that was everybody would pay for up to a 3/4 inch, and any size above that, the resident would pay the delta, like
Right.
the increased amount. That's not actually written in our code. I think because we never really implemented the policy, we didn't actually go forward with doing a code amendment. So I'm not sure repealing it does or doesn't do anything, but I think it makes sense to kind of get it off the books if it doesn't apply anymore. But that's kind of the only real, direction we have. We had just talked to council about it kind of, as we were doing the meter project, that yes, we understand these cost a lot more. We do want to make sure that the responsibility for a meter is on, the homeowner or whoever, if they're upgrading a meter, or if they were to break a meter or something, we would definitely be able to charge that back to them. But
Correct me if I'm wrong, at least you and I, and I think Clark to some degree, so correct me if I'm wrong, we've been looking at like fixed costs and variable costs, and the fixed costs, we always said, the total cost of the system divided, and then we all pay for it, and then your costs are yours. So using that sort of thought, if you want to upgrade your meter, it's kind of on you. But I, as you say, it's not very many people that do it, and it's,
yeah, I guess the most residential would probably be going from a 3/4 inch to a 1 inch, and that it looks like we about
10 times, 20 times.
I don't know. That's probably a development question. It's always associated with the new build.
Yeah.
If we've had, I don't know, maybe.
Oh, we don't have any of those.
Yeah, right. Maybe 10 a year. I don't know, but so it's usually associated with something like
So,
that.
At least to throw it out there, people should pay their cost, period. Whatever it costs us, they can pay it.
Right, I agree.
And we should, the cost of the system should not come out of the tax revenue, it should come out of the utility bills.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was just, to have an upgraded meter is usually a factor of a choice to make a certain size house. It is not because of the location of the meter or anything else. And so therefore, I think that that is a choice. If you are wishing to make a house that requires an above average size meter to service the choice that you've made for the house, then the upcharge should also follow that.
And that's, it's
And
a,
not come from city revenue.
it's a pretty insignificant amount of money.
Considering what
If you're
goes
gonna-
on otherwise.
Yeah, if you're building a house that requires a bigger meter, that's pretty insignificant.
Sure.
Sprinkler systems are now required for houses, bigger houses? So they
All
need
new
a bigger
construction.
meter.
Mhm.
Yeah, often, or even like a tank or something inside to make sure that it can fully.
But the meter, we haven't seen a water appeal, and I can't tell you when. So I'm glad we got them.
Yeah.
So
they're very helpful.
one, we have to repeal the existing just to, you don't have to deal with it. So someone needs to, that's kind of been the request. So just to be technical about it, we just need to make a motion to repeal the existing meter policy.
Yes, the water meter upgrade policy. And then I think maybe second, as far as like any, possible action, I think we're just interested in, if that is kind of the ideology of everybody on the commission, we do plan to do a water rate study this year. It's been a long time since we've done one. We want to know, once we've got the meters in the ground for another few more months, so we know we have like really perfect data coming in, we'd like to use that to go do a study. And I think this could be part of it. I think the sentiment is, do we want people to be paying for those larger meters, paying kind of their portion of it versus it just being distributed across the system? I think that's kind of the information we're looking for.
Historically, this commission has always been consistent with what is in the existing policy, which is there's a certain baseline that we all agree is okay, and to the extent that you need something else, that falls on you. As Chris mentioned that before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly certain that, and we can just say, is that something that this commission is also in agreement with?
agree
I
with
mean,
that.
conceptually,
We've been doing that for a while.
that's right. There's a base, and here, of course, we've just replaced everyone, so we're all starting.
That is
there.
the
We're all
base.
starting new, and
But
you've got
someone
10-year
could-
warranty, and it's, you're not gonna have to pay.
Someone could build a new cottage and only need a 3/4 inch meter, and would we still cover the 3/4 inch meter?
Right. It would.
Yes.
There'd be no connection fee because they would have already had
But
a meter on
to the
them.
extent that they need something else, I think
Mhm.
yes. So I think, however, you need to revise it so that it makes more sense in terms of the current situation. I think that type of approach is what we would support.
Great.
And whether that needs to be the exact dollar amount or 5% over, to
Mhm.
build in cushion.
Sure.
There was already a little bit more in the prior policy, so I think we would be supportive of that. Obviously, the idea is not to be egregious and turn it into a profit center. It's to
Right.
be covering costs and making sure that we can adjust for anything we're not aware of.
Mhm.
Would it make more sense for us to recommend revising the existing policy as opposed to repealing it and creating a new one, or just the way the existing one is written, it doesn't make sense?
I think it would need to be marked up so much that it's
Okay.
probably, I think it was for a very specific purpose at the time. Now we're kind of far past that. So I do think that recommending to council that just be repealed. And then I think this is exactly what we needed for when we go into our rate study, that we can adequately, convey how the utility commission feels about that. So we just don't bring you something that's totally different than what you were expecting to see. So
Would anyone like to make a motion to repeal the existing?
Yeah, so I would move to repeal the existing one and request information on the recommended upcharge for larger meters based on your analysis of our costs.
perfect.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. There's no abstaining. There's no opposing. Okay. So there is the repealing of an act.
Yes.
We've repealed.
And just for the
That's the
record,
first time we've suggested that.
Yeah.
for the record, for the minutes, that was a 5-0, just because
5-0.
Michaela's not here and one's on
Yeah.
Zoom, so.
And so, a part of the
6
future,
to 0,
in the
I guess.
future, y'all will have a chance to revise it, understanding what we are looking for, and obviously we'll have an opportunity then to put our own spin on. But I think you've got some good guidance. It's what we're looking for, and I know you'll build it to what makes sense for you guys to administer it, which is really the bigger challenge.
That's what you can administer.
Perfect, yeah, and we're looking at, obviously before next time we start budgeting, which would be about May, June of next year, so we're looking for a rate study before then, so we hope to start maybe in January, February. That gives us a good, 8 months of history with the electronic meters, and that'll give us just a lot more data about, how much they're costing and everything, so,
Great.
yes, all right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring up before we close?
One quick question, if I may. How are we doing? Are we covering our costs?
We are.
Okay.
Oh, I keep meaning to put just like a financial
Budget
overview
sheet.
on there.
Yeah,
we'll
that'd be-
we'll do that
put
at
that
the
for
next
next
one,
time.
just so you
Because I
can
just
see
wanted to
both.
see, because
Yeah.
when we
I think
started
Elizabeth
10
has
years
it.
ago,
Yeah.
it came a lot out of the city budget. And
Right.
The hope was it funded
Right.
itself, and I just kind of wanted to see if we're getting there.
And that's definitely not having to happen anymore. And in fact, I believe this last budgeting year, we were able to factor in a 6-month reserve in both water wastewater, which
You need a rated meal.
is a great thing to have. Yeah, absolutely. And we hadn't always had that before. So with those, we were still, you know, not in the red. So it's good. But we'll make sure we bring that back, especially now that we have a new budget year. We'll kind of bring a little summary of that next month.
Great.
Or next meeting.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was an update in any of the working discussions that we were having on cell phone reception or anything. There was, over the last few days, lots and lots of comments in the Rollingwood chats about people being very unhappy with cell phone reception. I don't know where they were in the survey, but, it's been a little while since we chatted about that and I wasn't sure where we were.
Yeah, I don't think on the city's end a lot has happened. I know we reached out to Westlake Hills about whether they would be interested in doing a similar survey, and I think there was some, you know, they might be interested in it. I can touch base with them again and see if that's something that they would like to do. I think maybe there might be power in numbers if we have a survey from a larger portion of this area than just Rollingwood. But other than that, that's kind of all we've gotten done so far.
Got it. All right. With that, I will adjourn. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank y'all.
thank you very much.
Good to see you all.
Yep.